Hello?
Hi, David. Can you hear me?
I can.
Awesome. You sound nice too. We're just waiting for Jelly to join. She's going to be advancing your slides today.
Okay, I sent an updated copy of them.
Yep.
Yeah, okay. So make sure those are received. Looks like there's somebody in the Q&A asking questions.
Let me see. Oh, yeah, they're asking about whether or not they are in mute. So normally when I kick off the webinar, I let folks know that all attendees are in listen-only mode.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, Tricia. Thanks. No, we can't. All attendees are in listen-only mode. So feel free to continue submitting your questions and answers to the Q&A box, and we'll be able to moderate them that way.
Can you hear me?
Hi, Jelly. Yep, I can hear you.
Perfect. Hi, David.
Hey, Jelly.
My kids are playing Animal Crossing right now, so see how that goes. Okay, I'm gonna pull up your slides real quick.
The ones I just sent?
Yeah. So I share my screen first, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, you want to make sure you have it open in full screen mode first, Shelly, the PowerPoint.
Okay.
And
then go and do it.
yep, and then you can share, screen, and then select the PowerPoint.
Do we see it?
Mm-hmm. Perfect.
Okay. Wonderful. Okay. Talking to you, Gary?
Oh, is that me?
I think so.
Oh, yep. 1 second.
Okay, I'm going to be muted until we start. So we'll start in 7 minutes. Hello, everybody that can hear me talking. We will start this presentation in 7 minutes. Well, good afternoon, everyone. This is Angelica, and good morning to some. This is Angelica with the Council for Opportunity and Education, and today we're doing a webinar supporting students and yourself in a time of crisis. We are happy that you can be with us today and hope that COE can help you not only with your grants during this time to provide you some resources and some options about taking care of yourself as we are all going through the shelter in place, the social distancing. So we have David Rivera with us today. Before we begin, just a couple of notes. You are all muted, so feel free to chat, feel free to check in on your kids, feel free to, guzzle that water. Only the panelists will be heard. I also want full transparency. We have another webinar that will start directly after this. It will not affect this webinar at all, except a few of our panelists may be coming in at the very end of this. So please note, we will get through this entire webinar. We will get through your questions, but there might be a few people joining us, all right, that they may be surprised that we haven't ended. So we're just give us some grace and flexibility on this one. Also, if you have any questions throughout the presentation, feel free to put them into the question box. I know some of you have already started. This will be, they will be answered after the entire presentation. We will go through them. Only questions that deal with this particular topic will be answered on this webinar. If you have any other questions, maybe about the government relations webinar that happened on Monday, or a compliance question, which are important to you, but not for this particular webinar, you would have to email me, Angelica Vilpando, and you can send me an email with those kind of questions. So now we're going to get started with today, supporting students and yourself in a time of crisis. I would really like to welcome Dr. David Rivera. He is an associate professor of counselor education at Queens College City, University of New York, and a proud McNair alum. He received his doctorate in counseling psychology from the Teachers College, Columbia University. He also holds degrees in psychology and counseling from Johns Hopkins University and the University of Wyoming. A counseling psychologist by training, his professional experience includes college counseling and higher education administration. His practical work also includes consultations and trainings on diversity, equity, and inclusion issues. He has been a faculty member not only for COE on a variety of topics and issues, but he's also an advisor to the Steve Fund, director of the City University of New York's LGBTQI+ Student Leadership Program, and board member of CLAG, Center for LGBTQ Studies. So I would like to welcome David. I'm turning the presentation over to you.
Thank you, Jolie, for the introduction, and thank you to COE for taking the initiative to focus some on this topic of wellness and not only supporting your students, but what you can do to support yourself. I kind of think about it as, when we were able to fly, when the flight attendant would come on and say, affix your oxygen mask before affixing those that might need your help. If we can't breathe, if we're not taking in the vital resources that are necessary to maintain our wellness, it might be a little bit difficult for us to support others. So I'm hoping that you'll be able to not only take lessons from this webinar today about what you can do to support your students, but what also can you do to support yourself. And to that note, if you can advance to the next slide, please. I have a mindfulness meditation that I'm going to use to start us out.
Welcome to the sober breathing space. Sober stands for stop, observe, breathe, expand, and respond. Stop whatever it is that you are doing and whatever it is you are about to do, and allow yourself to just simply be right here in the present moment. Observe what's happening in your body, noticing any sensations that are present in your body right now. Check in with your emotions, noticing whatever feelings are there for you right now, without judging anything, just allowing them to be as they are. Notice where your thoughts are right now, whether they're in the past or in the future or in the present. With the next breath in, gathering your awareness. With the next breath out, bringing your awareness now just to the breath. As best you can, keeping your full attention on the sensations of breathing. Breathing in, I know that I'm breathing in. Breathing out, I know that I'm breathing out. In, out. Whenever you notice your mind wandering, as best you can, simply bring your awareness back to the next breath. Breathing in, breathing out. In, out. Gathering your awareness again with your next in-breath. Breathing out, expanding your awareness to a sensation of your whole body being breathed. Checking in again with the body. What do you notice? What sensations are present right now? Are they the same or are they different than earlier? Checking in with your emotions. What feelings are present right now? Checking in again with your thoughts. Where is your mind right now? And with awareness, as best you can, responding to the situation, carrying on with your day, shifting out of autopilot mode and into mindful awareness.
And Jelly, if you can advance to the next slide. So I want you to kind of take stock of how you're feeling, both emotionally and physically. What were some of those thoughts that crossed your mind as we went through this very brief mindfulness exercise? And kind of how can you respond in that state? So right now you're looking at the acronym for sober breathing, and it's a method that's actually being used in experimental designs to kind of look at how it can impact people who are enduring stressful situations, or even folks who might be struggling with or navigating a mental health compromise. And so the acronym is STOP, Observe, Breathe, Expand, and Respond. This is something that I do with my students on a regular basis, even pre-COVID-19, something that I often do at the beginning of a workshop or a presentation or even a meeting as a way of helping folks to kind of recenter their self, kind of become more present in the moment. And it can actually help to increase one's attention span for what's going on. We often navigate our lives without kind of taking stock of the transitions that we endure on a daily basis from activity to activity. And it can often be helpful to take a pause, kind of do a check-in with ourselves, seeing where we're at emotionally and physically. And especially during this COVID-19 crisis, it can be even more important to have regular check-ins with oneself. We can go to the next slide, please. Thinking about the psychological impact of quarantine and the various experiences that you, your loved ones, and your students are going to experience can be helpful in terms of making sense or trying to make sense of what you're going through. There was an article that was put out on The Lancet by some researchers who, once COVID-19 was kind of surfacing, they knew that there needed to be some kind of response. So what have we learned from past incidents where folks have had to quarantine for a period of time. We know that post-traumatic stress symptoms can be triggered in this time of quarantine. So if you know of anyone, including your students, that might have a history of trauma, you might want to especially check in with them, because it's likely that their PTSD symptoms may reemerge or be triggered by the current context. There's a lot of confusion going on, not only confusion about the information and the misinformation that's floating out there in society about COVID-19 and the related issues that are being impacted in terms of what should we do to preserve our health, what are the healthiest behaviors that we should engage in, but also confusion in terms of how are we personally navigating this process. One thing that I've been doing to kind of intersect or mitigate the confusion is to limit the amount of news that I'm taking in and to go to the primary source, as opposed to broadcasts of a variety of nature that can lend a certain lens, if you will, to the news that's being reported. So I live in New York City, and the mayor's office puts out a weekly update, and I kind of go to that for my source of information, as opposed to the networks that I would typically go to pre-COVID-19. Anger is something that's likely to emerge. We often, in the mental health profession, think of anger as a secondary emotion that is often masking some other types of emotions, such as sadness, which some folks may have a more difficulty attaching to. So thinking about the anger that might come about during this time and where that's coming from. Infection fears, and that's kind of a primary concern for many folks, is how am I going to preserve my health and reduce the possibilities of getting infection. Frustrations for having to deal with a new context, having to work from home, having to be around your loved ones that pre-COVID-19 you probably had regular breaks from, but now we're kind of forced to live with each other in closer confines and regular contact. And that can bring up some frustrations. Boredom is an issue that might occur because of the lack of the ability to engage with those activities that we would that we normally engage in, such as working, such as engaging in those things that we need to do to preserve our wellness, such as team sports or outdoor exercise, or going to the movies or traveling, etc. I often think of boredom as a state of mind that we have more control over than we think of. Thinking of things that you can do to occupy your time. You know, a lot of reframing needs to occur where we can glean the positive lessons learned from this experience and kind of focus on that. And that can kind of help mitigate some of those boredom feelings that we might be experiencing. Fear of resource scarcity, you know, that's why a lot of people are having a hard time getting a hold of toilet paper, for example, and other things that canned goods, etc., that kind of disappeared off the shelves relatively quickly because of this idea that resources were going to be scarce. But we know that that's not quite true, that there are resources, and we might have to just alter the things that we eat or what have you, knowing that there are resources out there, and that it's highly unlikely that we're going to be in a true scarcity framework nationwide. Again, inadequate resources and information, so going to those sources of primary information. Financial loss is a definite issue that many people across the country are experiencing as we have unemployment rates that are surging to record highs. This is very much a concern that many of my students have, who have lost their jobs or who are living with family members who are losing their jobs or being furloughed. So that's a definite concern that we need to kind of validate and appreciate when people bring that to you. And then the stigma that is out there, especially towards marginalized communities, such as the Asian American Pacific Islander communities that have been targeted because of the rhetoric nationally that's been spewed about calling this the Chinese virus or the China virus, which is language that I hope that we do not use. No, this is COVID-19. It has a specific name. And we need to think about how we can reduce the stigma that various communities are experiencing. We can go to the next slide, please. Some other things that we can do as educators, you know, this is a list of 10 ways that teachers can maintain their vitality, but I think it can be expanded to anyone working in education, such as yourselves. Looking at this list, I'm just going to call out a few of them, but keep changing. For example, I know that I have to recalibrate my work and living environment on a weekly basis because this is new, working home for full time for many of us. And we might not have an optimal work setting already set up. And so it's intingent upon us to kind of recheck and assess what is working for us. So I had to change my work environment after the first couple weeks because it wasn't kind of producing optimal outcomes for myself. And now that I've relocated even just 15 feet across the room, you know, I live in New York City in a small apartment, so I don't have very many options, but just the small change was able to kind of keep me lively and active and vital in terms of trying to address the issues that I have to go with forward with. Forging connections with our students is important. Knowing that we have to think of new and innovative ways for connecting with our students, but trying to reach our students in a variety of formats, be that synchronous, where we're kind of talking to them live in the moment, either via Zoom or a conference call, or even a good old-fashioned phone call, something that maybe many of us have kind of shied away from because of the other means of connecting through text and what have you. But thinking about the various ways that we can forge our connections with students, bringing in real world issues. There's not a discipline out there that is not being impacted by the current situation. So this is kind of an opportunity where we can apply our learning and our teachings with our students to this real world context as a way of helping them to make sense of it, but also as a way of helping them to apply the skills and knowledge that they're learning in the classroom to the current context. Staying current with new strategies. So the council has been great about developing a number of webinars that have been focused specifically on COVID-19. They've adjusted the ways that they've provided outreach and education to the community. And we should be doing the same. We should be thinking about new strategies for connecting with our students and for facilitating the work that we're called to do. Networking and collaborating with others. There are some 500 people, I believe, on this call, which kind of speaks to the need for this kind of information, but also this is a way to collaborate and network with others. Teaching what matters most, and finally, knowing your strengths. It is our strengths that kind of get us through adversities. And so kind of doing a check of what your strengths are and how you can parlay those into best practices for working with your students and facilitating the job responsibilities that you have to do. If we can go to the next slide, please. The JED Foundation is an organization that I work closely with. It's a national nonprofit that is focused on addressing the mental health wellness needs of college students, broadly speaking. And they came up with a loveislouder.org website that is addressing issues that we can do to kind of stay as calm as possible and to address our own well-being and also the well-being of the students that we work with. And these 4 buckets are what they focus in on. So breathing, knowing that our breath is vital, and staying connected to our breath, especially in times of adversity, can help us to recenter ourselves and to kind of restore the calmness that we're seeking. Pressing pause. When you notice throughout the day that your emotions are kind of getting the best of you, which is to be expected, or that the thoughts are kind of just gathering in your mind a little bit too much that are creating maybe some confusion, press pause, literally. Take a pause, step away from the computer, step away from the monitor, step away from your phone just for a few minutes. Kind of do that body scan. What is your mind telling you? What are your emotions telling you? What is your body and your physical sensations telling you, right? So pressing pause as a time to kind of check in with yourself. Incorporating mindful moments throughout your day very intentionally. So this has been a real helpful part of my practice as coping with every day, is to take mindful moments when I wake up around noon, around 3 or 4 o'clock, when I know that my energy levels are being depleted, and then maybe at night as a way of kind of calming myself so that I can try to get some sense of a good night's sleep. And then engaging in play. This is something that our young ones do on a regular basis, which brings relief and joy to their lives, but we should also be doing this. And so you probably have seen, and maybe you're engaging in more game nights with your loved ones, be that virtually or in person, putting a puzzle together, coloring. Those are things that we can also do to kind of help restore some calmness and to give us some sense of coping that's rather active and kind of taking our minds to a more creative space that can be very generative and can be helpful in many ways. Next slide, please. So supporting our wellness. So there are things that we can do to support ourselves, but we can also use those lessons learned to support our students. First and foremost, we are in this together. I want to assume that everyone is suffering to some extent. We know that not all communities are being impacted equally. So it's also important to maintain that stance as well, but to know above and across the board that we're all into this together and that we need to be treating this as such. So what I've done with my students in my classes and in my leadership program is I've been providing wellness resources to them on a regular basis. I've compiled lists of not only national resources that I'll be sharing with you towards the end of this presentation, but also local resources. What are available in my local community? What are the local institutions providing? And kind of relaying those back to students. And I'm not only doing this one time, but I'm doing this on a regular basis. Sometimes they need reminders, and new resources are being developed on a daily basis, specifically related to helping folks cope with the COVID-19 crisis. So at the beginning of my classes, I give students the space to share what's going on for them in their daily lives. And I'm not only wanting to hear what's challenging them, but I'm wanting to also hear what are they doing to cope with their daily experience. This is not only helpful for them to kind of share and to reflect upon what they're doing in an intentional way, but in them sharing, they can be providing resources from their perspective to their peers and also to you as someone who's helping them. And so there's a reciprocity that we can engage in with our students. I teach group counseling, and one of the fundamentals of group counseling that makes it, that creates therapeutic properties is the ability for group members to be altruistic by sharing the ways that they dealt and have coped with their traumatic or troubling situations. And so we can kind of take that tenet and hold that in place for our students, where they can also get some healing from the altruism that they might experience by helping their peers cope. Another thing that I encourage is schedule consistency. This is what I encourage across the board, even pre-COVID-19. But now that we are kind of taking our schedules into our own hands, it might be even more contingent upon us to try to develop some schedule consistency in our daily lives. So developing a schedule, getting up in the morning and taking a shower first thing, as opposed to kind of letting it come through at the night. So kind of doing those things that we need to do to develop a schedule, to develop behaviors in our lives that are consistent, can help us to cope in a productive way. Part of that is incorporating daily well-being checks. This is something, again, a practice that I encourage regardless of the situation that we're in, but that might be more important for us right now as we are monitoring our own wellness and mental health. So a well-being check can be something as elaborate as possibly having a well-being journal, where at the end of the day, you can encourage your students to engage in some journaling where they do a reflection on their daily experience. What were the challenges that they encountered? What were the positives or successes that they encountered during the day? What was working for them? What wasn't working for them? Who did they connect with? And what were the quality of those connections? Those are all things that can go into a well-being check. They can even record their diets. Are they eating healthy? Are they eating regularly? What are the activities that they're incorporating to help them cope? So that can be a nice source of reflection, but then it can serve as a record where after the end of the week, they can kind of reflect upon those daily reflections that they've entered. And they can determine if there are patterns that they're able to identify. Were they feeling more low than not for that week, right? And if so, maybe they might need to seek extra help. So it can be also something as easy as in your phone, on your calendar, inputting the emoji at the end of the day that kind of best sums up how you're feeling. And so that might be a very quick way of doing it if somebody doesn't have the luxury or even the motivation to enter into journaling, but doing a very quick wellness check of what was my wellness like for the day, and inputting that emoji that kind of best meets that. And at the end of the week, again, at the end of 2 weeks, kind of reassessing that. As a mental health clinician, we kind of look at 2 weeks to a month as being the time frame for when something is not going right for you, that might be an indication that maybe you need to seek out additional resources. And again, I'll give you some of those that you can pass on to your students, including mindfulness. into your work with students. So again, I provided a guided mindfulness recorded meditation that I got from Mindfulness for Teens. Don't get thrown off by the teens part. I use this for my regular practice. There are a number of mindfulness guided meditations there, varying lengths, that you can use with your students, that you can also provide to them as a source of support that they can use on their own. We can go to the next slide, please. So I want us to give students also the opportunity to check in individually to the best of your capacity. I know that you represent a number of programs such as EOC, where you might only have one contact with the student, so maybe providing a resource sheet might be good for that, where they can seek out services when they need it. To those of you working in McNair, for example, where you have a smaller number of students, so you might have the luxury of providing more consistent, individualized check-ins. Whatever your the quality of your nature of your work might be, find out what works best for you. And so providing students either group or individual check-ins via email, online office hours, knowing that you don't have to be the one that provides them all the support, but you can be the bridge to other supports. Right? So think of yourself as a bridge to other supports in the same vein as you would on campus. When you're working with somebody who might have a financial need, you're going to be that bridge to the financial aid office, right? So we can be the bridge to other sources of support. Even if you're a licensed mental health clinician, and maybe that's not your role within your program, we need to maintain our boundaries of our professional competencies and expectations. And so being that bridge to other supports can be helpful. And there's a very elegant and accessible framework that I encourage folks to use. This is the VAR support framework. This is an acronym that stands for Validate, Appreciate, and Refer. It was developed by the Active Minds Network. If you go to activeminds.org/about-health/basic-VAR/, that will take you directly to this framework that explains it. But in a nutshell, what you can do if somebody comes to you with a concern, be that a student, a peer, a relative, is first and foremost validate their experience. We as people want to be heard and believed with what we're sharing with other people. So just providing that validation by saying, I hear what you're saying, you know, that sounds like a very difficult situation that you're in right now. Just validating it can be a source of relief, or bring upon a source of relief for that person you're trying to help. And then appreciating what they're saying. You know, it can be a challenge just to merely share a challenge with another person. Many people keep their challenges to themselves for longer than needed because of stigma with help seeking, because of stigma with mental health issues. People often even keep those issues to themselves more so. So it's really important that we validate what we're hearing, and so or appreciate rather what we're hearing as well. So after we provide that validating statement, give them a statement of appreciation, where we say, thank you for sharing that with me. That must have been hard for you. And I really appreciate you having the courage to share that with me, and that trust to share that with me as well. And then what you can do is refer them to a service that kind of matches what they need. So maybe they're saying, I'm having a hard time focusing, or there's just a lot going on in my mind, and I'm having a hard time kind of separating myself from a lot of the rhetoric and the news out there regarding COVID-19. And so what you might say is, well, something that's helped me is to kind of reduce the amount of news that I'm taking in. So maybe only view news or go to a media site for maybe 10 minutes at a given time during the day to kind of get what you need. Maybe try mindfulness as a way to kind of help center yourself and to bring some more clarity to your mind. You know, there's this website called Mindfulness for Teens. And so again, you're not having to kind of give them all the support, but you're providing a bridge to a source of support that's appropriate for what they need in that given moment. We can go on to the next slide. So now what I'm going to go through are some resources, some very tangible resources that you can give to your students and also to peers that might be seeking your support in this time of need. Many of you probably wear a helper's hat, not only professionally, but personally. And so what I'm going to talk about can be used not only in your professional life, but in your personal life. So Crisis Text Line is a national text line and service that provides crisis support 24/7 to anyone in need. I also work with, as Jelly mentioned, the Steve Fund, which is the nation's only nonprofit organization dedicated to serving and addressing the wellness needs of students of color across the educational pipeline. And we have a special partnership with them. And so if you're working with a student of color, for example, and you might want to give them this resource, to say text Steve 2741741, and they'll be matched with a crisis text line counselor who has been educated and trained to serve students of color. However, like I mentioned, this is a national text line open to everyone. So if you text hello or help or any kind of question to 7411741, you or your student or your peer will be connected with a crisis text line counselor. We can go to the next slide. As I mentioned, the Steve Fund is a organization where we've developed resources. So if you go to stevefund.org and if you enter our Knowledge Center, and this is a screenshot of what the Knowledge Center looks like, you'll have to provide your name and an email address to enter. But in this Knowledge Center, you'll find a number of resources that can help you understand the various emotional well-being issues that are impacting college students of color. But it can also be helpful for any student that you're trying to provide support to. There's also a couple webinars in here geared specifically towards parents. And now that many students are finding themselves back at home with their family, some may have been living with them to begin with, they may be, might be helpful that we provide resources to parents who are now maybe in a more close supportive role to their students. We know that the primary folks that folks turn to for support in times of need are their family and friends, but those folks are often ill-equipped to provide support to their peers and to their family members. So we have a couple webinars here specifically for parents on what they can do to help support their young people in need. We can go to the next slide, please. Additionally, the Steve Fund has, in response to this challenging coronavirus pandemic, developed a special part of our website for community conversations. You know, I engaged in one last week with some of our youth of color on how they're managing their daily lives and how they're using reframing as a very productive tool to kind of reframe this traumatic situation, to take out those golden nuggets of wisdom, the positive experiences that we're engaging with, be that maybe more connections with loved ones around us, or maybe the self-awareness that we're gaining about ourselves and the perseverance that we're able to actualize in this time. There's going to be another webinar next week specific to the Asian American Pacific Islander community that's addressing, again, the stigmas, the increased stigmas that they're encountering via the COVID-19 pandemic and the negative messages that have been delivered across the board towards this community. So if you go to stevefund.org/community-conversations/, you can find this very interactive website for young people of color. You can go to the next slide, please. Some other online resources I want to direct you to. So 7cups.com is an organization that offers free supportive chats and affordable online therapy resources for people ages 13 and up, which pretty much covers most of the people that we're serving. So I recommend that as a resource, especially for those that might need to engage in maybe some more in-depth therapy. ActiveMinds.org, as I mentioned before, is a mental health awareness and supportive organization for young adults. There are Active Minds chapters that are student-led on many colleges and universities. So if your college or university or educational organization has an active chapter, maybe focusing or directing your students there for sources of support. Again, using our phones for strength and for appropriate and accessible help can be extremely beneficial in this time. So downloading mental health apps such as Headspace and Talkspace that provide online therapy services, Calm, MoodFit, and Mood Mission are other mental health apps where you and students can engage in, again, mindfulness activities and other types of activities that can be used, again, to help recenter and help to bring in some calm and some reprieve into our everyday life. Next slide, please. Again, the JED Foundation has also come up with a resource page specific to COVID-19. The Trevor Project, so for those of you working with queer spectrum identified students, the Trevor Project has a hotline that they had pre-COVID-19, but that might even be more important for young people to have right now, especially for those queer and trans spectrum students that maybe are now living back at home, living in environments that might not be as validating as their college environments. So they might be a bit more at risk. I know I work with a number of trans students, for example, who are now living back home or having to be in their homes more than they're used to. Even commuter students now having to be in their homes more than they're used to, where they are being misgendered and mispronounced and given their dead name by their loved ones who are trying to be supportive but are kind of missing the mark. And so they're experiencing heightened levels of gender dysphoria, for example. And so providing resources to them might even be more in need right now. The Hope Center, which provides basic needs resources. Again, if we can think about this through a psychological lens of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that base of the triangle are those basic needs that we need, such as food, shelter, love, support, before we can kind of get to those higher levels of needs. And the top of that being self-actualization, which is really what education is all about and what we're seeking to support our students in terms of developing. So the Hope Center provides a list of resources that students can access to meet their basic needs. Next slide, please. Living with worry and anxiety. So I like this website because it's not only in English, but it is available in 20 languages. And so if you're working with students whose English is not there or their family's primary language of origin, you might want to give them this resource that they can then pass on to others who might be benefited by seeking information about how to navigate and manage their worry and anxiety in various languages. NASPA, the national organization that supports student affairs practitioners, has best practices for us that we can utilize in terms of providing supportive services in an online mechanism. For those of us working with students with various ability needs, the American Speech, Language, and Hearing Association has also developed resources specific to providing supports for students with disabilities. And then just as we're transitioning to providing our services in online and virtual formats, our students are also making that transition. And so noodlepartners.com has developed an online resource guide for students for what they can do to be successful in this online transition. And our next slide. I believe that's the end of what I have to offer right now. We do have time for Q&A, so I see that there are already some in this. The Steve webinars are free. I see that as one of the questions. Yeah, so the Steve webinars are free. Crisis Text Line is a free service. So those are free accessible services for folks.
So if you have any questions, please put them in the question and answer box. I did get a couple of questions about the presentation. You will be sent the slide deck after this presentation. It'll also come out community-wide in our Friday's Professional Development Weekly that we've been sending out. So you will have access to this. Another question that we had gotten earlier was, can they share this with other teachers or professors as they're trying to help other students, other people through this crisis? If you guys have any questions, let me know. A question that just popped up is, do you know of any free meditation apps? I have an issue finding free mindful apps, and the majority of our students are low income.
I believe Calm is one that is free. There's also one called Liberate for communities of color. That's another free one. There are a number of free ones out there, and there are also some that have traditionally been fee for or app for fee that have been giving like some trial periods, knowing that I've seen a lot of organizations doing this, even with webinars, providing some free services, knowing that folks are truly in dire need at this time. And if you go to mindfulnessforteens.com, there's some other free resources on there as well. Yes, some folks are putting in here in the chat. So if you look there, this is the great thing about community. We all have something to add, and I'm really happy to see that.
Right, and I'm going to just read a few out in case some people are having or only on the phone, or they're having challenges with this part of the presentation. It said, and I'm going to say this wrong, and I'm sorry in advance. Liberate is great and free.
Liberate
Is great and free. Podcasts are also good resources for free guided meditations. Headspace is doing a year-long subscription for $9.99 for students right now instead of $69.99. Do any of the text online counseling services provide substance abuse counseling?
There might be some that are specific. I don't know specifically, but whenever you kind of engage with one of those, be it from crisis text line or any of the others that I've provided, they often have a number of resources because they get a number of different of inquiries. And I do know that substance use is probably one of those, and so they would probably be able to direct you to something specific for substance abuse counseling.
How do you suggest assisting students who live in rural communities where there's limited access to internet or Wi-Fi? What tutoring resources other than what a college or university is offering?
So the tutoring resources isn't my area of expertise, so there might be others on the phone who might be engaging in that. I would imagine there probably are many on there. So if there's somebody on the line who knows of free virtual tutoring resources, especially those that might be accessible for someone with limited Wi-Fi or internet access, please send those along. But I know in terms of providing support, we might need to move to more asynchronous modes of providing supports to those that might not have secure or stable internet connections. Turning again to phone or landline communication might be the best way to support them in a synchronous fashion.
I appreciate it. I should have read the question before I read it out loud, to be honest. And what advice would you give to working parents who are trying to fill different roles?
Yes, there's a lot, and I honestly live alone, and some of the people I feel for the most are those that are not only navigating their own personal experience, but also those of their loved ones, including being their children's teachers. I think providing structure for yourself, providing me time, so incorporating that into the schedule where your kids can have their me time, you can have your me time, sharing some of this stuff with them. So maybe doing a mindfulness activity with them can be a way of engaging with them while teaching them a supportive coping mechanism, and also getting some coping with you at the same time. If you notice at the beginning of this seminar, when I did the mindfulness exercise, I was also participating in that as a way to kind of bring myself back to this moment. But I think providing and developing some boundaries in your home can be very helpful for not only preserving your sanity, but also for modeling to your family members, creating boundaries that can be very helpful and conducive to the situation where we find ourselves in tight quarters with other folks.
I just want to let people know we love that you're using the features, the raise hand features, but right now we're only taking questions that are put into the question box. So the raise your hand function is for people that we can call on. Since we are not unmuting people, you'll have to put whatever you want to say in the question box. Thank you. Next question, would you have any additional recommendations for helping students with motivation? And let me just read another one because again, this is about motivation. Do you have any magic advice for coaching students who seem to have lost all motivation for academics during this crisis?
Well, I'd like to think that I do have some magical powers. However, I have not unlocked the key or developed the charm to magically motivate people. Even pre-COVID-19, we know that accessing and encouraging motivation is difficult in general. Some things that I think can be helpful, though, again, are engaging in reframing. again, where sometimes that lack of motivation is being induced by the intense pressures that people have to produce at levels that they were producing at pre-COVID-19. There was an article in the New York Times that I read recently that basically was advocating for people to really intentionally recalibrate what productivity means for them, including our students, right? And so we know that we're not living in normal times, and so our traditional notions of productivity have to go out the window, right? Just staying home, staying healthy, and keeping others healthy in terms of not going out in public and exposing others is really what our main job is right now, right? We do know that we have other things to do as well. And so prioritizing those things, so coming up with a list of priorities. One of the slides I had on earlier said, do those things that might be more mundane first. So those tasks that don't require a lot of cognitive energy, maybe engage in those first as a way of warming up to then get to those areas that require a bit more creativity or a bit more thought power or critical thinking. Also doing a stock of your day. When do you find yourself to have more energy? And taking advantage of that. Traditionally, I tend to be more of a night person. However, I know that right now, by the time 4 o'clock comes around, and if I'm on a Zoom call, I start to see blurriness and I start to have Charlie Brown's teacher talking to me. And so I know that anything after 4 o'clock, I can't really engage in optimally. And so I'm now having to do some of those things earlier. So finding those times in the day, again, this is going to take some reflection, some intentionality, and some self-awareness about finding those times in the day where you are more productive and really maximizing those times. Engaging again in some mindfulness or taking some breaks. More constant, more regular breaks can also help people recharge their batteries. Our cognitive stores and resources are limited resources. That's why we have to sleep every night. That's why we have to engage in healthy behaviors as a way of restoring them. And we're going to have to do that even more so now. Again, to reiterate, and I can't reiterate this enough because I've been seeing messages where people are being encouraged to operate as if nothing is going on. We can't expect that of anybody, right? And so we need to kind of recalibrate what our ideas of productivity are. We need to be more compassionate to ourselves. We need to take stock in terms of what our strengths are, when we're more productive, when we're less productive, and optimize those times of more productivity, and kind of engage in this reciprocal, constant loop of self-awareness where we can kind of try to find the kind of right groove for ourselves.
So I think we've answered almost all of the questions. I did want to just read out a couple of other resources that the group has given out to others. So just so that everybody can hear them. Breathe is a free mindfulness app that with some sessions designed for students of color. One says Comcast, this is for Wi-Fi or internet, is offering free internet service right now. There are a number of places that are offering free or discounted services at this point, because only Comcast is absolutely, but it's in a limited footprint of America. So there are a number of different ones as well. Also, it says Student Success Agency is offering free tutoring for the one question that was about academics. And somebody said maybe we should keep the positive, encourage students and staff to change what they think of as a good day.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. So I've been really encouraging people to, again, practice more self-compassion and to be more gentle with themselves. But yeah, we can't expect that people are going to have that same definition of what a good day is that we had pre-COVID-19. Again, a good day is keeping yourself safe, staying inside, doing those healthy self-care practices that are going to keep you in as best mind as possible can be maybe what is good enough for our day's expectations at this point.
I think I mentioned this to you earlier, the last webinar that we did, is that as a person, I think I'm a pretty positive, optimistic kind of person. I'm also an extrovert. I'm also a mother of two and a partner of one. And this has brought out anxieties that I didn't even know I had anxieties. And so listening to you talk, this is the second time I've heard this conversation, and it's just helped me a great deal understand it, because it's such the unknown for me. It's very isolating in a lot of many ways. And so I really do appreciate you taking the time and walking us through this and giving us resources to really don't think that we're crazy, you know, that we're all in this together and that we're all experiencing this a little bit differently, and that we there are other people out there that can help us as professionals as we are helping students. I think is really important, and I thank you for that.
You're welcome. No, I'm happy to provide that. And one other thing I want to add is that modeling some effective behaviors that you're going through, even sharing your own challenges. A few weeks ago on a Tuesday, I wasn't having the best of days in the morning, and I shared with my program faculty and even in my department meeting that I'm having an off day. And so your expectations of me are going to have to change. And I got an outpour of support, but folks were also like, well, that was good modeling that you were able to demonstrate your emotional experience. That kind of was also validating to other people. And so we can be really effective models for our students, but also for the peers that we work with and our families in terms of how to express our emotions in a healthy way. And just naming the emotion can be a source of relief for many people.
Well, we thank you again. Again, the slide decks will be sent out in a couple of ways. They'll be sent out to the community on our Friday professional development weeklies that we've been sending out, and it'll go out to the community with the recording and again the slide deck. Also, I will be sending this out to everybody that has registered for this particular webinar. It's taking me about 3 to 4 days to get things out. So when I say I'll get it out right away, that's my right away these days. So you can be look out for that as well. If you need anything in the interim, you can always email angelica.vilpondo. My name is on the screen at coenet.org. And this concludes our webinar for today. Thank you, David. We appreciate it.
Thank you all. Take care and be well.